Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca, Canada's authority on home ownership. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
And thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, the Toronto Real Estate Board announced a huge 20% plus gain in house prices in August over the same time last year, and a listener asked quite bluntly, what's going on? How can you explain a recession and a rising home price scenario?
Well, how can you have a 20% house price gain in the middle of a recession? Well, obviously you can't. It's false. It's impossible. It's just simply not the truth. I don't care what CMHC tells you. I don't care what the Minister of Finance tells you. I don't care what any economist in Canada tells you. It is a factual untruth. Housing prices did not increase 20% year over year in August anywhere in the GTA. Did not happen. As we've said on the show lots of times over the years, Jim, the average selling price has got nothing to do with house prices. It simply is the amount of money, on average, a group of home buyers is spent. The pattern that these home buyers follow is naturally cyclical. In other words, the number of steps up the property ladder follows a pattern, the same pattern, over and over and over again. The only thing that changes is the share of buyers that are first-time buyers and where those first-time buyers are entering the market. What that means is, as you saw out in Vancouver, if first-time buyers are wealthy foreigners, non-Canadians, purchasing Canadian real estate, large, luxury class, single-detached homes, those purchases are represented in the average selling price and in the benchmark price, which is simply follows the average selling price. And it artificially inflates the average selling price because those buyers are wealthier and they're buying more expensive homes. Then when those buyers leave the market, okay, and the market no longer has those buyers in the mix goes back to what it traditionally is. Other times, the government can stimulate a housing market by letting first-time buyers enter the market, i.e., we'll go back to Vancouver again, 2017, when they had the first-time buyer benefit going on there. Okay, they induced young couples to go buy a condominium, which initially meant a whole bunch of early in the year lower priced homes were purchased, which subsequently, a few months later, resulted in trade-up sales, which caused the average price to increase again, which allowed the correcting housing market to be partially hidden throughout 2017. 2018 and into 2019 and into 2020 in Vancouver. Toronto, it's a totally different market. The sheer size of the market. First, foreign buyers wouldn't be as big of an impact in the market. You wouldn't see them. But the share of first sales going to first-time buyers really changes things. So what we saw in August being announced by Treb was first-time buyers abandoning the market. First-time buyers' share of the total sales was drastically reduced in June, July, and August, which means down the road, okay, your market is going to slow down because you need those first-time sales to make the market continue. If you get a wealthy foreign buyer or a wealthy buyer from somewhere else coming into your town and they buy an expensive home, then the number of sales taking place does not increase because the property, they don't buy in at the low price point, resulting in a series of sales taking place. At the same time that the average price increases. The average buyer is spending more money. They're buying a more expensive house on average. This is why economists get fooled when they're trying to find a correlation between sales counts increase and price increase. They're looking for a relationship there. Well, you can't, because you have to be studying the market for how it's functioning at that time. You have to be able to decipher where the share of sales are going in each category, and then between those sales, you could come up with the average price. That average price would never change. That average price would be the same for 2 and 3 and 4 months. The only thing that shifts is your share of sales. Now, what your listeners need to understand is this. A wealthy foreign buyer buying in Vancouver in 2015, 2016, early 2016, where that peak house price was recorded, is no different than a wealthy Toronto Canadian homeowner moving from Toronto up to Vaughan. It's no different than that wealthy Toronto condo owner, because their condo is technically doubled in price, realizing that they can move to Hamilton and buy a single detached home for the same price. That sale jumps into the sales chain, jumps into the middle of it, and it screws all the numbers up. Everybody gets confused. So they have to go back to saying average price, because it's so confusing. Unless you understand how it works, it's really, really confusing. So let me explain it to your listeners this way. We live in a town where there are only 3 houses that exist. It's a 3-home town. One home is worth $100,000, one home is worth $200,000, and the third home is worth $300,000. To make this even easier, we're going to say the land values are all the same. They're all in the same size lots. The only thing the difference is the $200,000 house is twice as big as a $100,000 house, and the $300,000 house is 3 times as big as a $100,000 house. That's what the difference is. Now, a new builder comes into town, and he looks at the market, and he says, well, this is a 3-house town. I really can't build a $100,000. I'm going to build a $400,000 house. Well, there's only one family in that town that can afford to buy that $400,000 house. It's the people living in the $300,000 house. Because the guy in the family in the $200,000 house, the family in the $100,000 house, can't afford to jump up to a $400,000 house. So the builder can't sell his house to the $300,000 house because that $300,000 owner has to sell their house first. So they put their house in the market. The owner of the $200,000 house sees the house and says, wow, that looks like a nice house to trade up to. They list their $200,000 house. The family in the $100,000 house sees the $200,000 house and say, hey, that's a nice house to trade up to. They list their $100,000 house. That market is frozen, Jim, unless magic happens. The magic is this. A buyer that's new to the town comes into the town. Now, that could be the family in the $300,000 house has a daughter who's getting married. She's getting married, and they want to own a home. So as they get married, they put an offer on the first house that's worth $100,000, which allows that $100,000 to buy the $200,000 house, the $200,000 to buy the $300,000, and the owners, the parents in the $300,000 house, to buy that $400,000 house. All the sales take place. Now, what happens if a wealthy homeowner from another town sees that house at $300,000 and they say, wow, that's a great deal. We can sell our semi in this expensive town and buy that $300,000 house in that cheaper town. They buy the $300,000 house, which allows the $300,000 owners to move into the $400,000 house. Well, look at the magic. 100, 200, and 300,000 averaged $200,000. Remember, the new home is not included in the average selling price because in most towns, builders don't list with real estate agents unless they absolutely have to. The market's slow. There's some need to list with them. The real estate agents charge such a low commission. But in the second time, the $300,000 house sold. You have an average go from $200,000 if all the houses sold to $300,000 simply because a wealthy new family moves into your neighborhood. the real estate board reports that as a 50% increase in price. Now, imagine this gets a little more complicated when there's 10 houses at 100, 10 at 200, 10 at 300, and a new builder comes in and they're going to build 4 new $400,000 houses. Now you can start seeing how complicated this can become. It becomes so complicated that people don't realize what's going on. Economists, because they don't know how the home trading market works, if they see this confusing numbers, maybe 1 month only one new lower income family moves in and they buy the $100,000 house, which allows the full chain to move forward. The next month, maybe it's a $200,000, a little bit wealthier family moves in. Another month, maybe it's a $300,000, even more wealthier family comes in. And then there's the occasion, Jim, where they skip all those houses and they buy right from the builder, the brand new $400,000 house. I can tell your listeners this. In my hometown of Burlington, we watched this go on for 40 years. This is the exact same pattern. This is how it works. The only way the average purchase price can increase by 20%, as the Toronto Real Estate Board was reporting, is that if first-time buyers' share of sales drops, house prices do not have to change 1 penny to report a 20% year-over-year increase. The actual price of the homes do not have to change at all. The only thing that has to change is where those buyers are moving from and where they're entering the market. Because when that happens, all of the numbers get messed up. And when you look at a real estate board that covers a geographical area as large as the Toronto Real Estate Board, which doesn't control 100% of the sales that take place in many of those markets within its geographical reach, it's very easy for people to get fooled by these numbers. House price illusion results, housing bubble gets bigger. I'll leave your listeners with this. In July, the Canadian real estate bubble inflated at its greatest amount in history. Let me repeat that again. This July, just July, it's going to happen again in August. I don't know if it'll reach the extreme that it reached in July, but it very well could and even go higher. It recorded the greatest amount of housing bubble was created in that 1 month than in any other month in history. This includes the boom that was going on in Vancouver in 16, the boom that was going on in Toronto in 17, and the boom that was going on in Montreal in 1819. All of those booms did not create as much of a housing bubble as just happened in July. The COVID bubble is what happened. COVID caused this bubble because no one was out there telling the public housing prices don't change in a month. The only thing that changes is how much money the average buyer is spending.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, Craig in Mississauga asked, the news is reporting over 600,000 people were missing their mortgage payments in August. Equifax issued a similar report. How should home buyers be reading these reports?
They should be reading the reports in no way like is being reported, Jim. There is no mortgage deferral cliff that we're headed towards. There is no mortgage deferral foreclosure increase that is happening. People just don't understand how equity changes in a home over time. So I'll use this example. A first-time buyer who purchased a home in 2016, pretty much anywhere in Canada, with 5% down, getting a CMHC insured loan, that property right now can handle a 25% house price bubble crash without the bank losing a penny. What everybody needs to understand is that the people who take the hit are the home owners. The banks are not at risk here, folks. The shareholders of the bank are not at risk. The only people that are hurt in a housing correction are the families who took the advice of other people and they believed it. Today, the reason people are making comparisons between the potential foreclosure rate today versus the 1980s and 1990s. And it is blatantly clear the moment you hear someone talking about this that they're clueless to what went on then to what's going on now. It was virtually impossible in the early 80s, in the early 90s, for a Canadian bank to foreclose on a property and come away clean. The Canadian bank who foreclosed on a property in 2018, in the 80s and 90s, was facing a huge loss at their bank. Not only were these properties technically equity negative at that time, but the bank had so much profit being driven from the mortgage that was on their books that they were going to have to write off a huge loss if any of those mortgages did not run through till the end of their term. That's not the case in 2020. Totally the opposite. A young first-time buyer in Vancouver who purchased in 2016 can handle themselves a full 25% house price correction without going equity negative. In 2017, you're probably looking at around 22%. In Toronto, someone who purchased a house in 2019, because of the way the appraisal process works, in other words, the appraisal is built on house price illusion, because everybody believes, like in the last section, the average selling price has something to do with houses instead of just totally being something to do with the amount of money that a buyer is able to spend. A 1-year-old property right now in the Greater Toronto area probably can handle a 15% house price correction, and the bank would still come away clean. So this is where the risk really lies, Jim. The risk lies for the homeowner. It relies fully in the shoulders of the homeowner, like it did in the 80s and 90s and again today. What's different is that the banks now are not facing a loss. The banks now have the power to foreclose and get all of their money back. All of it. This was not possible in the 80s and 90s. A bank right now, someone who has a 5-year term for the sake of the argument on their mortgage, the bank is able to foreclose on that property, sell the property, cover all the expenses, real estate fees, lawyers' fees, the 6 months of waiting till the foreclosure process is done, 2 months or 3 months further of a closing date delay. So now we're up to 9-10 months. All of the mortgage interest that is sitting there still owed had the mortgage term run its full term. All of that money is available for the banks to grab. That money wasn't there in the 80s. That money wasn't there in the 90s. People who are saying that the banks are at risk before Canadians because of foreclosures simply don't understand how the Canadian banks' mortgage books are structured. They don't understand how quickly young home buyers are accruing equity in their home over the last few years. That amount of equity is allowed to be filtered off and to cover all the expenses. Who should be worried are the actual homeowners themselves, because in the past, the bank couldn't foreclose on you and cover the CEO's butt. Today, the bank can foreclose on you, and the CEO is going to look like a hero because he made the profits of his bank even higher, or she did. That's where the risk is, Jim. The deferral risk today is the same place where it was in the 80s and 90s, on the shoulders of the innocent families who believed CMHC, every economist in Canada, the Minister of Finance, their real estate broker, their local real estate board, their grandparents, their parents, who all believe those people as well. A foreclosure risk is only to the family who lives there. And what their outcome is going to be is bankruptcy, possibly, or they're going to walk away from the property. What's great about right now is they can walk away from the property and the bank is not going to need to sue them to make up the difference. In the 80s and 90s, the risk was the bank was going to have to sue you. So not only did you lose your home, but the bank was going to get a garnishee against your wages, a judgment against you for all the shortage that they had. That shortage doesn't exist anymore. So that means the options for families are going to be far different today than they were in the 80s and 90s. At the same time, the Canadian banks have less risk today than they did in the 80s and 90s when those housing markets finally started to correct.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, Alice asks the program. We live in Burlington, Ontario, and last week it was announced home sales this August were less than last year's. Then we read every other city in the GTA has had huge increases. What's going on with Burlington?
Great question from Alice. Now imagine, Jim, the Toronto Real Estate Board reported a sales jump that was just historical. Okay, the Toronto Real Estate Board, they released a sales increase over last year of 2,000. Okay, so it was basically 25%, 24, something like that percent. Okay, so for the GTA, the Toronto Real Estate Board was claiming that there was I guess it was actually more than that, Ross. It was even more. It was over 30%, a 30% rise in sales. But in the city of Burlington, the local Realtors Association of Hamilton and Burlington, a premier suburb city in the GTA, sales dropped. Sales declined year over year in August. How is that possible? How can the GTA, Toronto, get an increase where the local realtors in Burlington report a decrease? How is that possible? It's because it's stats, folks. It's not data. Stats are created with the sole purpose of allowing real estate agents to earn commissions, nothing more and nothing less. What your listeners should also understand is that in Burlington, if you looked at what the Toronto Real Estate Board said had taken place with the change in house prices in Burlington versus what the Real Estate Board of Hamilton, Burlington said took place, it's a totally different thing. The Toronto Real Estate Board reported an average, they call it an average selling price or an average house price, that was $30,000 higher than what the Real Estate Board, the home board for the city of Burlington reported. They reported a median price, which is again about $30,000 higher. Okay? Now imagine, folks, they reported sales in the GTA were up over 30%, but in Burlington, the other real estate board working in that geographical area claimed that sales had dropped. How is that possible? How do they get these crazy increases in prices in, say, a town like Richmond Hill or Aurora or King Township? How do they get those crazy increases being recorded for all those different cities? Well, the way they get it is, if you listen to the earlier sections of this show, it's simply because the full sales chain was not functioning because of people, wealthy buyers, moving from the city they're in now to a place where houses are more affordable. They're buying more expensive homes in those cities. That's what's going on. What's beautiful about the city of Burlington, as I've said on the show before, and as I say to everyone that hires our firm, Burlington is the epicenter of MLS system data in North America. It is the most advanced MLS system in North America, except for the one that exists in San Diego, California, which is comparable to Burlington. There is no other MLS system in North America that can compete. What I mean is the accuracy of the data that exists on that board is unparalleled in North America. There is no worry in Burlington about confusing data from the city of Burlington with the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington versus what TREB reports. Because what TREB reports is sales increased in Burlington. The number of homes they say happened increased year over year in August, where the real estate board that is responsible for the city of Burlington says they decreased. Well, how did that happen? Well, there's this little function in the GTA called interboarding, where you will list the same property on multiple real estate boards. That interboarding allows you to report sales on a different timeline. That different timeline means you can be reporting sales that took place in June in Burlington to the Toronto Real Estate Board in August as if they took place in August, when they didn't. They took place in June. It's why this is the greatest fraud, the greatest financial fraud in history, is the belief in organized real estate stats. You can't, in British Columbia, you can't look at Vancouver stats without having a full command of the stats out in Fraser Valley. You couldn't even approach discussing Fraser Valley without having full control and knowledge over the Vancouver Real Estate Board stats. Because what happens if a wealthy townhouse buyer in Vancouver decides they want to buy in a single detached home in the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board's geographical district? Whoa! All of a sudden, boom! The average price jumps up because the sales of the cheaper homes normally being reported in the sales chain don't take place. People wonder how foreign buyers buying homes in Vancouver, single detached homes, caused house price inflation in the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board. Well, that's because the homeowner who sold the property to the wealthy foreign buyer in Vancouver needed another house. They targeted the highest quality houses in these other lower priced areas, and they moved. That's why you have the Burlington Real Estate Board reporting sales dropped in Burlington, but the Toronto Real Estate Board reporting sales in the GTA increased 30%. It's because they're stats, folks. They were never intended to be used for a home buying, home owning, or home selling decision. These stats were never designed for the public to use. And you can catch it right now. We have the Toronto Real Estate Board reporting a 30% year-over-year increase in sales, but the Burlington Real Estate Board, one of the premier subdivisions in the GTA, reporting sales dropped. If we go to the Hamilton Real Estate Board itself, we can see different areas where sales were down year-over-year and other areas where sales were up. Well, what happened, folks? You had so many home buyers moving from a more expensive area into a cheaper area that it's messed up the average selling prices in all of those areas, because that's how it's presented to the public. Average selling price. It's not the average selling price. It's the average purchase price paid. And in July of 2020, the Canadian national average selling price, which is actually the national average purchase price during the month of July, created the largest housing bubble in a single month that had ever been created. Simply do not believe a single word that you hear from organized real estate, a realtor, a real estate broker, because unless they can break it down the way that we just broke it down to you on the air, and they've done that for you for year after year after year, so that you could trust them. You can't trust them. You can't trust someone who has lied to you for years, whether it's their own incompetence, their own ignorance, or their own false beliefs. Right now, you can see live in real time when you're looking at the stats and you understand where the sales are coming from, where the buyers are coming from. In Vancouver, all you have to do is go back to 2015 and 2016 and remember the foreign buyers who jumped the queue and were only buying expensive homes, which drove the average selling price up, which your local real estate board said housing prices are up, false house price illusion, fear of missing out was caused, people rushed in to make bad decisions, your politicians made bad policies believing it. Now, the policy needed to take place, in other words, keep Canadian homes in the hands of Canadians, but there was no reason not to expose the fraud that had just taken place, that the average price of a home had not increased the way that the real estate boards were reporting.
Ross, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks for having me on, Jim, and I apologize for any noise in the background today. I'm not in my office. It's getting painted, and some of the staff there is chatting up a storm.
Well, as long as you're busy, that's the good thing. My guest has been homeownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca. As you heard, Ross loves to answer your questions. You can send them to info@housestreet.com. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.